trying to chain together 3 main monoplata positions, right? So last week, okay, it's going to be our entry this week too. We're walking back, putting our hip on the shoulder, okay? As soon as we pin the arm, back stepping, grabbing the sleeve or the wrist with the snogi, lifting, clamping, and then getting here, okay? The first position last week was all submissions in this direction. So planting my hand, sitting directly on top of them and getting sort of an S mount here, okay? We also looked at what if we're here, like if he sits up and starts off balance me, I can roll through for submissions, so on and so forth, okay? So this week is gonna pick up off of the end of last week's class, okay? The next what if being if, and this is very common, if he starts turning towards me, usually accompanied by an underhook, okay? And I'm gonna take the loss on this position, you guys see when his elbow comes out, okay? So if I still have his elbow here, it's still reasonable to try to find ways to pummel in and force him flat, okay? But a lot of the time, actually most of the time, this elbow is gonna come out, okay? So this is a perfect time to manipulate the underhook and switch to a monoplata on the other side, okay? So we're gonna go to the second monoplata position, which is a mounted monoplata, okay? So I'm gonna grab his funny bone here. I'm gonna lift all of my weights into my left hand. I'm gonna take a big step over, as close to his shoulder as possible, okay? Now, you should always take the time here to follow the fundamentals of last week, okay? Keeping his arm at that angle for a shoulder lock. So right away, even if his arm's only like slightly bent, we're gonna take the time to push the wrist into the pocket to get that optimal bend in the arm. It's just creating good habits for this position. Obviously, if he straightens like all the way up here, like, yeah, we got some work to do, okay? So from here, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start to look for this wrist, okay? This is gonna be one of the easier parts. Even if he like keeps it far away, it's not too hard to find and like pull it in. A lot of people are gonna be trying to escape mount here, and like he puts his elbow right where I want, right? So I'm gonna pin his hand to his chest, and I'm gonna get my knee over his elbow, okay? Now, we're not done yet. Guys, look at the position of my hips. My whole body, actually, I'm like 45 degrees to him, okay? So I'm gonna use a forward motion with this foot to get parallel to him. And then a huge part of like setting the shoulder locks in these positions is look, his elbow is not in a straight line with his shoulder, okay? So the last thing I want you guys to do here is get your hips as close to the submission as possible. It's gonna start to make his shoulder tight right away, and you'll get that visual cue of the elbow being in a straight line with the shoulder. No, sorry, and then I'm clamping here. You guys see that? Good 90-degree bend there, okay? Great. Okay, one more time. Okay. So starting off the same as last week, we're going to reverse case gatami. We're walking our legs back. I'm sitting on top of his arm. Remember, if this arm's far back, you're gonna continue walking and backstepping until you can find the sleeve or the wrist, okay? I lift, I clamp with my heel, hand on the floor, okay? He's denying me last week because he's turning into me and getting an underhook. And a lot of times you just saw that elbow is gonna come out. I'm gonna lift his funny bone, lean my weight into my left hand. I'm gonna step over, okay? Now we're entering into a mounted monoplata, so the second position, okay? Grabbing his wrist, pinning his hand to his chest, pinching my elbow, okay? I'm not accepting this angle. I'm making an effort here to step this leg around and get in a straight line with him, okay? Lastly, after I've attached this arm to my hip, I'm walking forward, watch his elbow. Okay, now it's in a straight line with his shoulder. Now we're actually starting to set up submissions here. For example, if he's here, there are ways to like pummel through, start to shelve up his arm. Okay, this would be a mounted monoplata. Potentially like big in MMA too, where people are more likely to body lock you. Okay. Same thing here. If you're able to do this and this, you don't need to do what we're doing right now. You just do last week, right? This happens before I'm even able to do that. That's why I'm doing all this, okay? You'll actually find if you start moving towards last week, you're moving away from this transition. So that's probably why it's hard for some of you. All right, so here, okay, getting that good shoulder bite here. Now, the side I have the knee on the ground, that's my left side. I want to use that hand to control his elbow here and keep that same crunch we had last week, the ribs to the quad, okay? I'm going to use my right hand to start guiding myself to the mat. Now, very important, as I guide myself to the mat, I'm going to bring this left foot as close to his neck as possible. Okay? I always want this foot on bottom. Okay? Whether I'm able to cross my feet or not. Okay? If I do the opposite, and my feet, especially if my feet are uncrossed, he can bridge on top of my leg, and this leg is going to get stuck underneath of him. Okay? So this foot's always on top. All right? Now, as I'm landing with my upper body, this is what I'm doing. I do use my hand to get to the floor, but eventually I build to my elbow here. As soon as I get to my elbow, it's like a swivel. Okay? I'm just going to take this hand, either get like that Lego man grip, I'm going to make a fist, or I'm going to grab his sleeve. All three are going to serve the same purpose, which is to keep his wrist flush with my hip here. Now, you remember what I said in mount about the shoulder? Getting this elbow in a straight line with the shoulder, okay? It's even more important here if we want to go for the monoplata. So watch. Look at the space between my hips and his shoulder. There's a lot. Whenever we go for a submission, the thing that's pressuring through the joint wants to be flush with it, right? So right away here, if you need to, you can uncross your feet. If not, you're just going to scoot your hips as close to the shoulder as possible. Look at his elbow. As I do that, it's getting closer and closer in line with the shoulder here. Okay? Now to finish, perfect world, I'll just bring my hips forwards, and a lot of times it'll work here, okay? But as we know, while we're sparring, while we're competing, people are moving, they're giving space, we're gonna need more than that. So my right foot's gonna help the rest of the technique. It's gonna come out, I'm gonna bring my right knee to my chest, and I'm gonna leave my heel towards the top of the head. I'm not tucking my heel. The reason why is because I wanna use this heel to shrimp my hips out, which is gonna rotate his shoulder, okay? So here, you'll feel the shoulder get really tight, so be careful. Now my hips are just gonna come, a little bit. Knees turning in, remember the function of this knee is not only for the submission, but to maintain a good pin here, What else does this leg do besides shelve his elbow up? Guys, your foot shouldn't be under the head here. Your foot should be out. Remember what we did last week when the leg was stretched? You're doing the same thing here. If my leg is collapsed like this, I don't have a lot of mobility here to shrimp my hip out and put pressure on the shoulder lock, okay? Your knee should be in, but your heel should be on the ground, and look, no hands, just off my heel here. Make sense? So I'm doing this, okay? You're not gonna be able to do that like this. Okay, it's relaxed here. He has more room to escape here. So that's why I'm always telling you guys to step this leg up. It's very important, especially as we turn for the monoplata. If I start turning here, he's gonna follow me, and he's gonna get on top. Okay? But if you guys do a good job of putting all the small details in order, try to follow me now. See, it's gonna be way easier for me to track him here. Okay. So, end of the last technique, we're controlling the wrist, controlling the elbow, okay? To start the monoplata, first thing I need to clear the space between my hips and his shoulder. So I'm scooting in, okay? As I scoot in, I can already start disengaging my legs. I straighten, and I pull this knee to my chest, okay? Now if he's not tapping here, I use my heel to bring my hips this way. From other heavyweights who play this position, or just like old school people in general, they will show you submissions from right here. It is possible to rotate the shoulder here and get shoulder locks. It's possible to wrist lock them here. There are other also transitions where we can step over the face, okay? Especially if they're strong. Okay. You can keep doing that detail where you advance your hip forwards. Okay. And that can sometimes weaken the grip there and you can just separate it. Sometimes when you're here, Grant will lift his top leg and he'll take his hand and he'll grab his own leg to try to stop you, okay? What is causing the submission in the first place? What part of my body? My hips, yeah, and my legs, okay? So a lot of times what you guys can do here is just keep going, okay? You could switch to other submissions. I could step over an Omoplata. I could throw mounted triangles, okay? But from here, my intention is to go forward with the submission, okay? Watch my hip versus his wrist. Okay? Eventually that's just gonna weaken, and then I can go back to whatever. Really bad things that can happen here, okay? So some people like to pin the wrist and slide their shin over. Okay, we do that from different positions. However, this is the wrist. Let's say I go to proceed. Grant, what are you going to do with that arm? Okay, there's some options here, but again, we don't want to end up there. So that is one good example of specifically why I like to pin the hand to the chest. So he can't do stuff like that. Okay. If you ever do find yourself in a situation where you do clear this arm, let's say he brings it all the way through, okay? Again, it can work sitting here, but you are leaving, his hand is mobile, it's free, it's possible you could grab your leg. For those of you that have the flexibility to do this, if he does underhook your leg here, this is a great time to switch to mounted triangles. We can put a false knee on belly, and when he goes to grab my knee, I'll pin this to his chest and I'll lean, and then I'll catch him here. And if he comes up, I can triangle him, but now we're in the monoplata. Alright, so we were having the issue of going here right away. Again, not wrong, but it's going to take you guys to different things, okay? So we conceded by going to our hip and our elbow. Guys, you shouldn't be laying on your shoulder to do this. A lot of you did this at first. You're taking weight off the shoulder when you do this. You should be on your elbow and your hip, okay? When you go to finish the monoplata, okay? Same thing, you shouldn't lay this way. He'll tell you this is way looser, okay? You also shouldn't start sitting up right away and then pulling this knee in, okay? Like, yeah, I'm lifting him off the ground, but watch when I go to rotate, he's gonna come with me, yeah. You need to stay on your hip, okay? Try it, if you could, yeah. Again, this is a really small detail, but he's telling you right now how important this is. You need to stay on your hip, okay? See, he's not sitting up with me now. Does that make sense? All right, now let's just use that as a segue into the next submission. When is it appropriate to sit up, okay? Maybe you didn't scoot your hips close enough. Maybe he's got flexible shoulders, you can't get the tap, okay? Or one of the biggest problems is as you enter this, the last thing you're doing here, putting the wrist in the pocket, sometimes you're a little too late and he's gonna rotate his thumb up, yeah, and he's gonna straighten his arm, okay? The good news is if you're using proper positioning here, that wrist is gonna hit your armpit and that's directly gonna set up an arm bar, okay? So from here, he straightens his arm. Right away, I'm gonna post on this hand, and the hand that should have already been on the elbow, we gotta do a better job of that, stay on the elbow, is pulling up, okay? Now, I am starting to sit up and square up with him here. As I do that, okay, I'm gonna go both hands to the elbow. If I don't actively roll this elbow in, Ulysses can turn his thumb every which way, and that might not get him out of the submission, but that could do enough to take pressure off the elbow. So the key here to really get tension through the arm is to grab the elbow, either with one hand or both hands. For now, let's do both hands. And roll this towards your belly button. Now there's tension running through his arm, okay? Now, just like last time, I'm gonna pull this knee in once again, but since we're sitting up, the foot is gonna land typically close to behind his head or fully behind his head like this. Now to finish the arm bar, this is what you're doing. You're not laying back, okay? If you lay back here, this hand's gonna come out, and you're gonna have to switch to another arm bar, okay? Like a more traditional arm bar. So this is a lat style arm bar, meaning you don't lay back, you just pinch your elbows, you pull your knees in,
Tap.
and you try to touch your shoulder blades together, okay? Anyone wanna feel that? Grant does. Oh, Connor. Bullet for the homie, huh? Yeah, dude. He's being a good partner there. That's what he's gonna do. He doesn't want to get that arm hurt. Sometimes, like you'll step over and it'll be right in the pocket. But sometimes too, again, they know something bad is coming. They're gonna fight that a little bit. Okay? These details are important. All right. So we landed here. For whatever reason, usually it's because I was too slow to put the wrist in my pocket, he rolls his elbow up, or turns his thumb up, okay? I'm gonna let him do that, and I'm gonna let it get to my armpit, okay? You guys see his hand? It's just his hand that's past me. Again, the end of like the leverage here is right below his thumb, so don't go past this. And don't go too far down this way, right at the end of his wrist, okay? Now as we start to sit up here, once you get to both butt cheeks, you should have some balance. Both hands on the elbow, roll it in as you're doing this. Pull your knee to your chest, okay? And then shoulder blades together. Watch here. Not only is it gonna be looser, you're risking losing the wrist when you make this a habit, okay? Again, that's when you're gonna have to come here, go to a normal arm bar, or if he sits up off that, you're gonna have to attack other things, okay? When you set this lat style arm bar, you need to build a habit of not moving your posture backwards again, hence the name lat arm bar. Your lats are like hinging. Okay. So watch, I'm not gonna sit back, I'm gonna stay here.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not doing this. But right about here, like with a Kimura or with a Monoplata, you do have the ability to retuck this. But there's gonna be a point where their arm gets so straight that you cannot retuck it. Extending. This is what I'm seeing as you guys are going to the mat. You're too slow with this leg or too relaxed with this leg, okay? So if I'm not trailing this leg up in a meaningful manner as I go towards his neck, he can grab my leg, come to the top, okay, a lot of times, or if he's not able to come to the top, he'll simply put my foot in a quarter guard. This is a problem, okay? Thank you. Okay. Now from here I can find, depending on how he's moving, I can find ways to get back to the top. This also would lead to another option here, which we're not going to practice this week, which would be the Gogoplata, okay? So Josh Ainer would like spam this on people, okay? He'd bring his foot over. Naturally, he'll grab my foot. A lot of times he'll just like control their wrist in some manner and then start climbing under the head. And then there's the choke with the shin, where like you can just literally rotate his head. One of the main functions of this leg, besides keeping him on the ground, is not letting this hand get back inside this lock, right? Treat this like a triangle. It kind of is, right? So if I'm too loose here, he might not sit up. He might just bring this hand back through and like, look, it's gonna be tough now. Sure, I could try to retuck it, but at that point, they're gonna be pretty seriously pushing that leg away, right? The second thing, if he does the opposite and he brings his arm out, okay? Guys, this is a triangle, right? So it's not gonna be my first option here because I'm a little bit out of alignment for it. But what was happening to some of you? He was able to get to his side. Okay, and a lot of times here, you can start to threaten other things. Like you can go for the triangle. If he leaves the arm at this angle, we can go for that tight Kimura from the triangle. Okay, we have a lot of good options here. We'll look at one at a time here, okay? So as I'm stepping over, if Ulysses is getting up to his elbow, all right, structurally, this presents a ton of problems for the Monoplata. Okay, I'm trying to climb upwards with my hips here. It's not gonna happen, okay? And he's likely, as he's rising here, to like push you off balance. You're gonna fall, yeah, basically this way. It happens a lot. Okay. So typically when this happens, whether I'm in a Monoplata or whether I'm in side control and he has an underhook, I am gonna look for a front headlock. Okay. I'm gonna look to start attacking the guillotine. Okay. So let's compound this with the second issue. What I just talked about. He's trapping my foot. Okay. So if he were to stay on his shoulder here, for example, all right, so this presents some problems here, okay? It's harder to pinch this. I definitely don't want to sit down like this because look, I don't have that foot to cross face him, okay? So two really important things to identify here. These can be really big problems in this position, okay? So we're gonna solve this with the guillotine. So he gets up to his elbow, bringing his head to me, but I'm gonna meet him, okay? Whenever you guillotine somebody, don't just grab their chin, don't just try to loop your arm around. This is a lot of space. Even if you can lock your hands here, it's gonna be significantly looser, okay? Whenever he comes up or whenever I go to him, or both, remember, we're pummeling the shoulder to the nape of his neck here. That's what that's called, right? Such a gross word, right? I'm gonna grab his chin. I'm gonna go for the overhook. And guys, really important, I talked about this last night, I'm not staying here. Once I do that, I'm doing this motion. I need to pull this through so this cuts into the front of his neck, okay? So 1, 2, again, like you're rocking a baby here. That's where this is gonna get really tight, okay? Now we just need to find a finish. Obviously, I would love to stay on top and drive him to a mounted guillotine or a side control guillotine, but look, he's still rising here. So a lot of times, whether he puts me down or whether I decide to, it's gonna be good to just concede to your hip here. Okay. As we concede to the hip, we're always crunching with the guillotine. We're not stretching out. He's gonna pop his head out. Okay. Here, legs down, and now hips up. As I pull this towards my face. Okay. If Brad comes up, but he's not trapping my foot, okay, as you guys get your grip and you fall, I'm going to advise that you fall into a close guard. Because when you go to a close guard with a guillotine, a lot of his defensive options are null and void. He can't jump to the side, you know, stuff like that. So as he comes on top, I'm going to take the time to sweep my left foot under and lock my close guard. Okay, now here, crunch up. And another benefit of the arm in is if I'm here and we got that Von Flew choke, that can cause you problems here too when you're going for guillotines. So arm in's going to be the better choice typically here. Comes up here. It's usually because like I lock this up and he's like, oh no, I'm hitting this thing. So he's going to drop back down and try to start defending. But when he does, watch. I don't have a post, but look at where it's bringing me. I just put my head on the floor, walk forwards, and now I'm going to walk up and just sink right into a mounted guillotine, which is even better. Now, a really good principle this teaches you is that everything we're doing right now, it's like a big circle, right? We're not hitting dead ends here. So if I ever get a mounted guillotine, let's say he drops down like he just did, let's say he starts pulling my hands free. Guys, look, I can go back now. Hang on. Straps my foot here. There is possibilities for more flexible people to pull the foot over here. We can monoplata here, and we can go into versions of the Gogoplata here too.